Hi, I'm Peter Jones, Chartered Surveyor, author and property investor. And I've had a really good question which has come in from James. I've got it here, I'm going to read it out to you. And he says, Peter, do you know of any solicitors who can arrange a contract to give the lender of the finance some security, stroke confidence, that I'm not going to or legally can't take all their money and run away with it? Do they have a floating charge on the property? Would you have a sample agreement that you can forward to myself? Grateful if you can assist in any way, James. It's a great question and there's a lot there to unpack. So let's just think about JVs and what we need in order to make a JV successful. So the first thing that James is asking about is, can I put him in touch with any solicitors? Well, the reality is that there's many solicitors out there who can do this kind of thing, not just my solicitors. And actually, the last time I did this with a solicitor, it cost quite a lot of money. And so I probably wouldn't recommend them, to be honest. I would shop around. Any solicitor should be able to prepare you a contract should you need one. But the thing is, it's all about scale. How much of a contract do you need? Now, the last time I did a JV, I had a contract through from a solicitor, which was about probably 20 pages. And the reality is that all but 2 pages, in other words, 18 pages, were just almost standard terms and conditions, which didn't really relate to what I was trying to do. So why they didn't just come up with a bespoke agreement, I don't know. But there we go. So in that particular instance, because I was actually the lender, I didn't pay for it as part of the deal. The borrower paid for that, and I was glad, because otherwise I'd have been querying the solicitor's bill. I know they charged a lot of money for that, and as I say, 18 pages was just paragraphs which they keep stored on their word processor. So what a waste of money, probably. So, look, the first thing I'd say, James, is I'd shop around. Talk to as many solicitors as you can, see who's out there, ask them to give you a quote. But remember, it all depends on what you're trying to do. One of the things which I've been thinking about is how much you're actually borrowing. Now, if you're going to borrow £1 million, then you may want, a 60-page document. If you're borrowing £5 to do a refurb, then to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't be going to a solicitor. I probably shouldn't even be saying this. I'm not an IFA or an accountant, so I'm not giving financial advice. But to be honest, if it was a small amount of money, I'd probably do the contract myself. Now, I've been in property long enough to be able to think, and I'm not just being smug or boasting, but I think I could do this. I could probably do a better job than a lot of solicitors because I know exactly what it is I'm trying to achieve. But if it was a bigger amount of money, I wouldn't take the risk. Why? Why would I ever want a solicitor to do the contract, by the way? Well, there's only one reason. If anything goes wrong with the way that the contract is worded, then you can claim against their professional indemnity. That would really be all I was thinking about. The actual words that you're going to use are going to be sort of fairly self-explanatory. So the answer is no, James. I can't recommend a particular lawyer, but there are plenty out there who'll do it for you. You just need to ring around a few and find out. If you're going onto property forums, ask at the property forum or Facebook groups who people are using, and I'm sure they'll be able to recommend a solicitor as well. So let's get into the more interesting bit, which is, would they need a floating charge? Well, again, there's so many different answers to this, and again, it depends on scale. Ultimately, what I would suggest, though, is this. Rather than assuming anything and rather than making any sort of grand offers to the lender, James, I'd be asking them what they want, because it may be that your lender doesn't even realise that they could have a charge. And I'm not saying that we're trying to do anything manipulative or anything to pull the wool over their eyes, but I do believe in keeping things simple. So unless they particularly want a charge or there's a good reason for them to have a charge, I wouldn't even be offering it. Now, if they say to you, I'm not going to lend you the money unless I can have a charge, that's another matter. Now, the thing you need to be careful of, though, is if you're going to be borrowing bank finance against a property, the bank will want a charge and they will want first charge. So any JV partner, for example, will have to come in as a second charge or below. Better than charge probably is going to be a restriction. If you think about it this way, there's 4 levels of security. There's a first charge, second charge, which could be third charge, fourth charge, and then there's a restriction, and then there's a notification. Well, a restriction restricts, actually it says on the tin, it stops the owner of the property from doing anything without your consent. So the big difference between a restriction and a charge is if you have a charge, the charge holder can repossess the property. You can't do that with a restriction, but a restriction can stop the owner of the property from either selling or refinancing. So for our purposes, that's usually enough. There's going to be very few instances where somebody's going to go and repossess a property. It'd have to go terribly, terribly wrong before you want to do that, or before they want to do that to you. So I would think about what level of charge they actually need. But I'd certainly not be offering them at this stage a charge. But if they ask for a charge, then you can consider letting them have one. So, is there a standard form of contract which I can give you? The third part of the question. Well, no, there isn't. Why? Because every JV agreement is going to be different. Why? Because every property is going to be different. The partners to the JV are going to be different, and the needs and the aspirations and the wants and the desires of each of the partners to the JV is going to be different. So there isn't a standard template which you can just put in the facts and figures and the names and that's it, all sorted. You need to think about what it is you're actually trying to achieve through your JV, which is why I think a bespoke agreement is better anyway. Now, obviously, if it's a very simple agreement, if we go back to the £5,000 we're borrowing for the refurb, then yes, you could have a template and all you have to do is then drop in the names of the different parties. But to be honest with you, this is something which you could knock up from scratch, really, in 5 minutes, should you wish to. Because, let's face it, there's only going to be some very basic things in your JV agreement anyway. Assume it's a basic JV. You'll need the names of the parties. You'll need the address of the property. You'll need the amount that's been lent. You'll need the terms. Are you paying them interest? In which case, how much are you paying them and over what period? How long is the actual loan for? What happens if they can't pay it back at the end? Those are the kinds of things you want to be covering. Now, the reason why it needs to become bespoke, though, is because you need to make sure that the JV agreement covers the things which are important to your JV partner. And that's really a question of sitting down with your JV partner and finding out what they need. So, for example, one thing which I always suggest is that you go through all the different what-if scenarios. What if you can't repay the loan at the end? Well, if you've already got a mechanism in place to cover what could happen if you can't repay the loan at the end. By the way, why might you not be able to repay the loan at the end? Well, it could be for any number of reasons. If you're going to revalue the property and refinance it and then the market dips while you're doing your refurb, you may not be able to get as much money out as you want. Maybe not that you can't get any money out, but you might not be able to get all of your money out or as much as you wanted out, which means that you're a little bit short when you're paying back your JV partner. There's 101 things which could happen. What happens if you fall out with your JV partner? What happens if they want to get out of the agreement early? What happens if you need to sell earlier than anticipated? It would be really good to have all of these actually listed as points in your JV agreement. So again, you've got to talk to your JV partner and come up with a bespoke agreement. Now, you can come up with what's important to them and then send the words over to a solicitor who can come up with the right form of words to make it legally binding. And depending upon how much you're borrowing, you may or may not want to do that. But that's why I would say, no, James, there isn't really a bespoke type of template which I would use. If anybody's offering you one, by the way, I'd be very wary of it because for all the reasons I'm talking about, it's not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. Every JV agreement is going to be different. So there we are, some thoughts and hopefully some help around JVs. We could probably do about 2 hours on that, but anyway, that's enough to keep us going for now. So thanks for the question, James. Keep the questions coming in. In the meantime, here's to successful property investing. But what I will say, just before I go, if you haven't been to my website, please go over to my website. You'll find a load of great resources there. It's www.thepropertyteacher.co.uk. And if you're just starting in property, you might want to check out my ebooks. The Successful Property Investors Strategy Workshop is a popular one. It shows how I started my portfolio, how I got to £2 million worth of property in 4 years, starting from scratch with none of my own money. And yes, that is true. I literally started with none of my own money. It's all there in the book. It tells you how I did it. And if you want to copy what I did, you can copy it as well. And there's other great resources on my website as well, including some free reports if you want to download those. So go and check it out. Until next time, here's to successful property investing.